Hi, everybody.
How's it going?
How's everybody today?
Fantastic.
Friday.
Pretty good.
It's
Pretty good.
Friday, right?
Yes, sir.
What's on for the weekend?
Beers.
Beers.
Maybe some White Claws.
So,
You like White Claws? You know what I'm talking about?
yeah, I get it. I get it. That's funny. All right. I don't have a comeback.
There is no comeback.
No, I know. So, thank you for your answers to question number 25. I was just before class trying to figure out a way to post it on Moodle, and I was looking for a shortcut way of doing it, and I failed. So I will probably do it the long, old-fashioned way, and I'll post the answer. In the meantime, I think we should start talking about Chapter 6. The term structure and risk of interest rates. And then we're going to have a test next week, right?
Is that Wednesday or Friday? Or Monday, I guess.
No, we've got to finish this chapter on Monday and Wednesday, and then I will post the exam on Moodle. And you'll have a certain amount of time, and you can do it anytime you want, sort of like, Wednesday through Friday, that kind of thing.
So will we have class next Friday, or will that be the exam?
Yeah, the exam will make up for class. Actually, let's see how far we get today, because I really would like the exam to be 75 minutes. So we'll see how it works out. I started doing something different today. I thought I would do something different. So we're going to start chapter 6, the risk and term structure of interest rates. Examine the sources and causes of fluctuations in interest rates relative to one another, and look at a number of theories that explain why this happens. Identify and explain three factors explaining the risk structure, and list and explain the three theories of why interest rates vary across maturities. So I wrote some notes down here. If we were in the classroom, this is what I would write on the board. The risk structure of interest rates. This implies that bonds with the same time to maturity have different interest rates. So we both have a bond that comes due in 10 years. It matures in 10 years. But my bond is paying 7%, and your bond is only paying 5%. Why might that be?
7% bond might have a higher default risk.
Yeah, it could be a higher default risk. And exactly, thank you, Matt. Term structure, the relationship among interest rates on bonds with different terms to maturity. So 10 years, 15 years, whatever, right? God, what the hell? Oh, so bonds with the same maturity date, in answer to the question, Matt just told us it could be because of default risk. It could also be because of liquidity, and it could be because of tax considerations. So I would write on the board right now 3 reasons for risk structure of interest rates. So these are all long-term bonds, yeah, from 1919 to 2017. And I would write this on the board. 2 important features of bonds with the same maturity. Although they all move together, they're different at any point in time. So look at, these are in red, the corporate AAA, and in blue, the corporate BAA. And then we have state and local munis and long-term government bonds. Also, notice that the difference between them is different over time. So default risk, the probability that the issuer of the bond is unwilling or unable to make the interest payments or pay you back. We consider U.S. Treasuries default or risk-free because we anticipate the government is going to pay them back. That might not be the case in a less stable place like Venezuela or, Sierra Leone or something like that. The risk premium is the spread between interest rates on bonds with default risk and interest rate on treasuries. Remember, we're saying treasuries are default free. So there's a risk premium. A higher default risk means a higher risk premium, means a higher interest rate. Yeah? So let's look to a response to an increase in default risk on corporates. We have corporates here, corporates here, and we have treasuries over here. We have supply and demand. We have a decrease in the demand for corporates. This is an increase in default risk, shifts the demand curve for corporates to the left. Maybe we're in a period of economic uncertainty or something, or we're having some sort of a financial crisis that we want to move away from corporate bonds, right? Because we're starting to perceive that they might be riskier. Some of these corporations may not be able to survive. So as a response, step 2, we're going to move our money into treasuries, and the demand curve for treasuries will shift to the right. So look at the interest rate change. Here, the interest rates at price T1, price corporate 1 is the same. But as the price goes up in the treasuries, the interest rate, what happens to the interest rate? Feels like a stupid question to me. As the price goes up on the treasuries as a result of increase in demand, the interest rate goes down. As the price goes down on the corporate side, resulting in a decrease in demand, from the decrease in demand, the price goes down, the interest rate goes up, the spread increases, right? The spread is the risk premium. So remember when we started this lecture, we said relative to one another. This is exactly what we're talking about here. This is a relative risk premium. Riskiness in the corporate world versus risk-free in the treasury. So this is the Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch ratings agencies, right? So S&P would say AAA, Fitch would say AAA, Moody's uses this A, small a, small a. So this was always one of the ratings agencies, this was always a kind of a job I thought I would like in the finance world, is to work for Moody's or S&P or one of these outfits that does a risk analysis, a real quantitative job. That's what I wanted to do. Well, when I occasionally would look for a job, I would often look at that. All right, here's a further down. So notice, these are prime, maximum safety, right? High grade, high quality. These are poor. Yeah, these may be in default. Oops. Maybe these will be in default, and these are in default. Why would you want to buy one of those bonds that's really low in quality? We can't have the same people answering this question as just answered the last question.
The price is probably really low, or yeah.
Yeah, okay, but what does that mean? What does that in turn mean?
If they don't default, the return on them could be extremely high.
The return on them might be quite high, and exactly like you said, Jake, that the result of that is the price is going to be quite low. Yeah, the interest return on those bonds that are risky is much higher than a bond that you're sure you're going to get your money back. So this is the global financial crisis and the treasury spread. Collapse of subprime led to large losses. Many investors doubt. And that's true. We call this a flight to quality when the markets are in such sad shape that people are looking at only things that are almost risk-free, So liquidity. This is the risk structure of interest rates. The second thing in the list, let's just go back up here. Same maturity why do we have the risk structure? We have number 2 here is liquidity. The relative ease with which an asset can be converted into cash. The cost of selling the bond, the numbers of players in the market. Also to consider is income tax. Interest payments on munis are exempt from federal income tax. What does that imply about the interest rate available on a muni? Let's think about what I just said. I just said that municipal bonds are exempt from federal income tax. What does that imply about the return on a muni? The interest rate on a muni?
It's probably very low.
It's going to be lower. Yeah? Thank you, Jake. So interest rates on munis and treasuries. Step one, tax-free status is going to shift the demand for munis, increasing the price, thereby lowering the interest rate. Step two, shifts the demand for treasuries to the left. Because we want to buy the munis, we're not going to buy the treasuries. Remember, we're talking about in relative terms. The result that munis end up with a higher price and lower interest rates. So Congress approved legislation to increase income tax on high income taxpayers from 35 to 39%. The increase in income tax for wealthy people helped lower interest rates on munis. Yeah, does that make sense? Let's go back here. Tax-free, if all of a sudden you find out 5% more of your income is going to be taxed, you're going to look for a tax-free way to invest your money. And that might be munis. Term structure of interest rates. So I think this is the third thing, right? Tax considerations. Oh. Risk structure. Now we want to talk about term structure. Bonds that have identical risk, liquidity, and tax characteristics may still have different interest rates because the time to maturity is different. My bond matures in 12 years and your bond matures in 10 years. That's what we're talking about. So 3 facts about the term structure of interest rates. And we're going to come back. There's theories we're going to look at to answer these questions. So I would be writing this on the board if we were if I was in person. Interest rates on different maturity bonds move together. That's a fact. If the short-term rates are low, the yield curve is more likely to slope upward. If short-term rates are high, the yield curve is more likely to slope downward. Say that again, Gallagher. If short-term rates are low, that's the front end of the yield curve. The yield curve. Short-term rates are low, the yield curve is going to slope up. This is time. If short-term rates are high, the yield curve is more likely to slope down. Okay? If short-term rates are low, yield curve is going to slope up. If short-term rates are high, yield curves are going to slope down. Yield curve almost always slopes up. Yield curve, a plot of the yield on bonds with differing terms of maturity, but the same risk, liquidity, and tax. Upward sloping, long-term rates are above short-term rates. Flat, long and short-term rates are the same, inverted. So they get used to this, maybe. Here we have a normal. This is a normal shape where short-term rates are lower than long-term rates. Inverted yield curve looks like this. Long-term rates are less out here than short-term rates.
So, Professor, is there specific types of like bonds that tend to have like short-term I mean, higher short-term rates and then higher long-term rates.
No, when we talk about the yield curve, we're talking about bonds with identical risk, liquidity, and tax characteristics. See? Sorry. The term structure, bonds with identical risk, liquidity, and tax characteristics have different interest rates because the time is different. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, so then it's just the time is the difference between everything.
Right. All right. So we were here. Different terms to maturity, but the same risk, liquidity, and tax. So we need a theory to explain these three things. Remember these three facts. We need a theory that explains why this goes on. The theory of the term structure of interest rates must explain interest rates on bonds with different time to maturity move together. How come? When short-term rates are low, yield curves have an upward slope. Short-term rates are high, yield curves are more likely to slope down. How come? Yield curves almost always slope up. How come? So we need a theory. We have three, in fact. The expectations theory, well, it explains the first two, but not the third. Then we have the segmented markets theory. That just explains the third, but not the first two. And then lo and behold, the liquidity premium theory combines the two and explains all three facts. That sounds like an exam question, doesn't it? I think so. All right. Movements over time of interest rates on U.S. governments. Figure 4. Interest rates on bonds with different maturities move together over time. Let's talk about this expectations theory. Interest rate on a long-term bond will equal the average of short-term interest rates that people expect to occur over the life of the long-term bond. Buyers of bonds don't care one maturity over another. They don't hold any quantity of a bond if the expected return is less than that of another bond. Bondholders consider bonds with different maturities to be perfect substitutes. Let's talk about these. The interest rate on a long-term bond will equal an average of the short-term interest rates that people expect to occur over the life of the long term. An example, the current one-year bond pays 6%. You expect interest rates on a one-year bond to be about 8% next year. Therefore, the expected return for buying two one-year bonds should be 7%. Therefore, the interest rate on a two-year bond must be 7% for you to be willing to buy it. That's the interest rate here. Yeah, the interest rate on a long term will equal the average of the two short terms. Otherwise, you won't do it. The expected return for buying two 1 years must be 7%. Here's the example. An investment of $1. interest rate sub t, I sub t, today's interest rate. Expected interest rate, I t plus 1, interest rate on 1 period bond, next period. I sub 2t, the interest rate for a 2 period bond. The expectations theory says that 1 plus I2t times 1 plus I2t minus 1, of course, equals 1 plus 2I2t plus I2t squared. Yeah, if you were to multiply these out, you'd get this, right? Of course, this part is very tiny, right? We're talking about 0.06 squared, or whatever the interest rate is, right? 0.04, 0.06, 0.08, whatever it is, it's very little. The expected return for holding the 2 period, I set my alarm so that to remind me that you guys send me a chat saying hello so I have attendance. If I do it at the beginning of the class, I'm afraid you might check out. Thank you. The expected return for holding the 2 period bonds for 2 periods is 2I sub 2t. If 2 1 periods are bought, we get IT 2 1 periods, right? This period and next period, expected IT plus 1. Both bonds will be held only if they're set equal. Otherwise, you're not going to do this. This is the expectations theory. In expectations, you expect to get the same amount next year as this year, or you're not going to do it. So this is just a little bit of math here, right? 2 is over here, bring it over here. The 2 period rate must equal the average of the 2 1 periods rates. And then if I back up, that's exactly this. 6 plus 8 divided by 2. No big deal, right? This is not a big deal. Don't be frightened. Oh, and then longer maturities, you just add them all up and then take the average, yeah? The average of the periods going forward must equal the current period in expectations. So this explains why the term structure of interest rate changes, why interest rates on bonds with different maturities move together, and that's fact 1, yeah? Why the yield curve tends to slope up. If short-term rates are low and short-term rate and slope down when short-term rates are high. But it doesn't explain why the curve usually does slope up. So we have this second theory. So let me back up. Segmented market theory, right? We just did the expectations theory. Explains 1 and 2, but not 3. Segmented market theory explains 3, but not the first 2. Let's have a look at segmented markets. Oops. So segmented markets says that bonds with different maturities are not substitutes at all. The interest rate for each bond with a different maturity is determined by the supply and demand only of that bond. Investors have preferences for bonds over maturity, one maturity over another. It explains why the yield curve would slope up if investors generally prefer bonds with shorter maturities that have less interest rate risk. Then this explains why yield curves usually slope upward. Okay, so it doesn't explain 1 and 2. Here we have the liquidity premium and preferred habitat. Let's go back. The liquidity premium combines the 2 theories, combines expectations and segmented markets to explain all 3. So we're lucky. We found one. The interest rate on a long term will equal an average of short term expected to occur over the life of the long term plus some sort of a liquidity premium that responds to supply and demand conditions for that particular bond. Bonds of different maturities are partial substitutes. Yeah, that makes sense, right? So we have a liquidity premium theory here. We have this same formula that we had a few slides back where the interest rate, the average of the interest rate going forward is equal to the average end time interest rate, but we have an added liquidity premium here at the end. Yeah, that's a premium for holding a bond that's a long term. Investors have a preference for bonds of one maturity over another. Preferred habitat. In other words, you prefer maybe 10-year bonds, as your go-to investment. You would be willing to buy bonds of different maturities only if they earn a somewhat higher expected return. Investors are likely to prefer short-term over longer term. That's preferred habitat. And so the expectations theory yield curve here is flat, but the liquidity premium shows that we add a little bit in terms of premium as the years go out. That's this, L sub NT, a liquidity premium. This gets more and more as we go through time, the liquidity premium, yeah? Interest rates on different maturities, they move together, explained by the first term in the equation. Here. Yield curves tend to slope up when short-term rates are low and inverted when short-term rates are high. This is explained by the liquidity premium in the first case and by low expected average in the second case. Typically, they slope upward. So even if the interest rates are flat through time, the liquidity premium indicates that the yield curve will slope up. All right, and then we have just pictures of according to the liquidity premium theory, pictures of the yield curve. Steeply upward sloping yield curve, mildly upward sloping yield curve, flat yield curve, downward sloping yield curve. This is expectations of future short-term interest rates. And then this is yield curves for the government, what they look like in 1981 and 1985 and 1980. So 1981, this is significantly inverted, right? Short-term rates were high and expected to fall. Here we have a normal curve, March 1997. Short-term rates are low and expected to rise. Or stay flat and have a liquidity premium attached to a longer term. So that was pretty fast. Let's do a discussion using the problems. And when we come back on Monday, probably we'll dive a little deeper into some of the slides. But let's have an opportunity to discuss some of the problems and put you in groups. Because what time is it? We've only got 10 minutes. I'll put you in. How many of you are there? 25, that's all. Okay, so I'm going to put you into 4 groups.
Excuse me. I don't see the problems up on Moodle yet for chapter 6.
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
No group work today.
It just showed chapter 6 and chapter 8 PowerPoints.
Really? Dude, you are so right. This is a problem because if I was at Bonaventure, I would walk down the hall and throw it in the copier and scan it and then post it. But now I got to do it with my cell phone, one page at a time. Let me have a look at your book. So the first three questions to chapter 6 were the ones I wanted to do today. We'll do them all together, and I'll read them out to you. They're in your textbook. If junk bonds are junk, why do investors buy them?
Can you repeat that?
If junk bonds are junk, why do investors buy them?
There's potentially huge upside.
Yeah, the interest rate on them is going to be very high. So there's potentially quite a lot of risk, but there's also potentially a really high return. So if you're a real player, yeah, and you like risk, then that would be the way to go. Which should have a higher risk premium on its interest rates? A corporate with a Moody's BAA or a corporate with a C rating?
Corporate with the C rating should have a higher risk and interest rate
Exactly. How come?
because they'll pay you more for taking more risk.
Exactly. Thanks.
Yeah.
Do you think that a U.S. Treasury will have a risk premium higher than, lower than, or the same as that of a similar security in terms of maturity and liquidity issued by the government of Colombia? Want me to say that again, right? Do you think, I feel like this is a game show, you know? Do you want the Chevy Impala behind door number 3? Oh, God, help us all, man. Do you think that a U.S. Treasury bill will have a risk premium higher than, lower than, or the same as a similar security issued by Colombia?
Lower than.
Yeah, so the bond issued by Colombia is going to have a higher risk premium because we don't know what's going to happen in Colombia, right? All right. So that's 1, 2, and 3 in chapter 6. I also have number 7. So write these down, right? 1, 2, 3, number 7. Number 11. Number 22. Number 23. Sorry about that. And number 24. Those are the rest of the problems associated with chapter 6. Okay, so have a look at those over the weekend, and when we meet again on Monday, we will continue with this chapter 6. All right, and what I anticipate doing is not having class Wednesday or Friday, but having the exam span the 2 class sections. Is that cool?
That's cool.
Does anybody have a problem with, I want to have a longer exam and not have class? These 50 minutes is like kindergarten.
That's cool.
Okay. Well, let's meet on Monday and talk more.
All right. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Okay, thanks. Hey, Kevin? Yeah, sorry, I was teaching a class.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right.
Okay. No, I got the parts for that. I need to get some parts from yesterday. The feeder wasn't feeding the boiler
Yeah,
for some reason. So I was gonna see if I could go there in a couple minutes.
yeah. As best I know, the women should be there.
Okay, can you give her a call? Because I don't have her phone number.
Yeah, I don't
I
have,
thought that was your wife or something.
oh God, no. Where are you now?
I'm in Orange right now.
All right, okay. Yeah, I'll call my wife because I don't have her number either.
Okay.
And I'll make sure somebody's there. If she's not there, I can meet you there. What time do you think you're gonna get there?
I should be there within 10 minutes or so.
Oh, I'm about 15 minutes away.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thanks. I'll
If I get there, you get there before me. If I get there before you, I just wait for you.
okay, very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
All right.